Hello and welcome to the Avanti Entrepreneur Podcast. I am Dave Mamano, and I have a great guest on the show today, Loren Feldman. Loren, welcome to the show.
So happy to be here, Dave. It's an honor.
Loren, so you and I have a great past. I think we tracked it down to 2009 when we met through really, I'll say, Gould Burlingham because of his book called Small Giants, which I read. When did it come out? 2008, 2009, I bet, right?
A little bit earlier. I was still at Inc. Must have been 2006 or 7, I'm thinking.
Okay, well, yeah, so that book changed my business life at the time, right? Small Giants, everybody, Gould Burlingham. Talking about not at the end of the day, it's talking about he interviews a lot of great business owners who did not sacrifice why they got into business, their purpose, their why, as they call it these days, for growth. Right? They certainly some of them, a lot of them grew to multi-million-dollar endeavors, but it wasn't at the expense of why they became an entrepreneur or why they got into business. Right? And
they were more focused on being great companies than being huge companies.
Exactly. So they kept the purpose, right? The purpose and the passion, right? So met you. So what happened is there became a movement of that book. I believe Paul Spiegelman called Bo and said, "Hey, let's start a nonprofit of small giants of people that believe these principles. We'll all get together." In Ann Arbor, Michigan, with Ari Weinzweig from Zingerman's and so I met you there because I went and, Bo had told Paul about me because I ended up meeting Bo because I was a freak show that called every company owner in Small Giants book that he profiled because I wanted to meet these people.
Did you really?
Well, that's how I met Jay Goltz and Norm Brodsky and a lot of the other Small Giants. And
I didn't know that.
So I was kind of like a healthy stalker, right? I mean, so I met you there, but your career has been really incredible. You've always been a great content person. You worked for Inc. magazine, and then you worked for Forbes magazine, always with kind of highlighting business owners and entrepreneurs, right, and their journey. And then you were very involved with Forbes with the Small Giants organization as well. In fact, that's how we met too. When we met, you were kind enough to let me write articles for Inc. magazine. I was in the online version, and I wrote a monthly online column for Inc. magazine. So thank you for letting me do that. And then also continued, I think, for about eight months with Forbes as well. And then I just had too many things going on and had to kind of prune the rose bush. But that was a fun experience. So thank you for those opportunities. But
my pleasure.
So I mean, some really obviously being in New York City, Inc., Forbes. Working for some great companies, some great brands, meeting some incredible people. But today you are doing something different. You have your own company that is providing a lot of content in different ways, which you can tell us about. But the company is called 21 Hats. And so first of all, why 21 Hats? And tell us about what you're doing.
Well, thanks, Dave. We were looking for a name, and I've never liked the term small business. It's actually something that some business owners find offensive. And, if it's your business, it's not small. You don't like to think of it that way, even if it's small.
Yeah.
So I wanted to come up with something different. And actually, it was in a conversation with Jay Goltz that we came up with it together. We were just playing with notions. And one of the things we wanted to emphasize was that we respect business owners. It's not easy to build a business. You have to wear a lot of hats to build a business. And so we started with that. And then we decided, we put a number in front of it. What's the right number? And we played around and we liked the number 21. And obviously there's nothing magical about the number 21. It could have been 22 or 23, but we picked 21 and we liked the ring of it. And it's done well. I think the thing I like best is that it doesn't exclude anybody. We're trying to build a community for anybody who is trying to build a business. And, we're not focusing on companies that are venture backed because they get lots of attention already anyway, and they don't need as much help as other businesses. But I didn't want to exclude them either. And 21 Hats is something that I think applies to anybody who's trying to run a business. So if you can come to our community and get some value out of it, you are welcome to come. And we wanted a name that indicated that.
Yeah, there's a lot more of the entrepreneurs and business owners that you're talking about than there are of the venture people, the venture backed businesses, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, there's I heard a stat that
but they get all the attention, and I, having spent my career, at Inc. and Forbes and the New York Times, I feel some responsibility for this. We tend to focus on those venture-backed companies that are trying to change the world, and honestly, they get too much attention, and companies out there that are fighting the good fight every day do not get the attention they deserve. That's what Inc. magazine was originally founded to do, kind of the Bible of those kinds of businesses. That's who we're trying to reach at 21 Hats as well.
I think it's a great idea. Last time I checked, there was about 30,000 of us in this country at least, right? So
30 million.
Oh, I mean, 30 million when I say 30,000.
30 million.
We're in the middle of the quarantine and my brain is turning a little fuzzy. So thank you for that. 30 million. Yes. Yeah. So it's a very significant number. And, the bottom, I mean, that's what we do at Avanti as well. I mean, I think that's why we're Kindred Spirits is, Avanti listeners, our family, our people in the network. We're startups, small businesses, trying to get to that next level. And we need help. We need people like you and people like Jay Gould who have been there and done that to really give us their experience and their journey. And frankly, we're going to talk about your podcast. You have 5 great business owners on there. I know one of them very well, Jay Gould. She's been on my podcast. And if you Avanti listeners, if you want to go listen to that podcast, it is on AvantiEntrepreneur.com. But Jay Gould is, for those of you that know him, seasoned business owner, 30 plus years, Chicago. I believe he has 5 businesses, and he was on the cover of Inc. magazine years ago as Small Business Person of the Year, right? Small Business of the Year.
No, you know what it was for? It was when Bo Burlingham wrote the Small Giants book.
Oh, okay.
Picked one owner in the book to focus on, and Bo wrote a treatment of that book that just focused on Jay, and I actually edited that story with Bo, and we put Jay on the cover. And it's a really great story. Bo's the man. Bo's he's a legend, and deservedly so. Yeah. The book is great. There's some stuff in the article about Jay that isn't in the book, and Bo has actually told me that in some ways he likes that article about Jay even more than he likes some of the stuff in the book. It's a great piece.
I read it years and years ago. I mean, it must have come out 15 years ago, right? But or whenever the book came out. But I want to go find it and reread it because that's how I met Jay, and Jay's been a mentor of mine through the years. And for those of you that don't know Bo, I mean, Bo was the managing editor of Inc. magazine for a number of years, right?
I don't know the exact title. He might have been executive editor, but he was there almost from the very beginning. George Gendron was the founding editor. Bo worked with him, and he was there. I went to Inc. in 2002. It was still headquartered in Boston at that point, and I was part of a group. The magazine had been bought by by a subsidiary of a German company, a magazine company called Gruner and Jahr, no longer exists in this country. They bought Inc., and a bunch of us editors thought we were going to show these, these bumpkins from Boston how to run a real magazine. And then we met people like Bo and others who actually really knew entrepreneurship and realized these guys actually know what they're doing. We knew how to use a semicolon. They knew entrepreneurship. But,
you both needed each other.
Yes. Well, Bo knew how to use a semicolon too. He's a very good, he's a wonderful writer. But, it turned out to be a great combination for me.
So when I was first starting out back in 1995 was my first business, which was a magazine, by the way, Next Step magazine for high school students. I subscribed to Inc. magazine, and it became my Bible. I mean, when it would come in the mail, I literally would find a quiet place, and I would just read it cover to cover. I loved it. I would read Norm Brodsky's column, right? Ask Norm, who's I became friends with now as well. But I would always read Bo's, and usually had the feature article, right? Quite often. And I
Sure.
became a big fan of his. Like I didn't know him. I really respected his writing style, and his articles would really help me. And so years later, I met this guy, Rob Levin, who I'm sure you know, who was another magazine publisher, New York Enterprise at the time. And Norm Brodsky was on his first cover, and they were friends. And I asked Rob, I said, "Do you think you could introduce me to Norm Brodsky?" He's like, "Sure, come to New York. We'll go have dinner with him." Oh, I'm like, "Wow." Go to New York, get together with Rob. We go to Norm's office in Brooklyn, right? And we're meeting with Norm, just talking to him before we go out to dinner. And this guy walks in, right? Blonde hair, just wearing regular. I think he had like old jeans on and a t-shirt. Could have been the janitor for all I knew, right? And walks in, and Norm says, "Oh, this is Bo Burlingham." I'm like, and I was like a young Beatles fan, like, "What? Oh my God." And so the four of us went out to dinner. One of the best nights of my life,
That's great. When I went to Inc. magazine, before that, I'd been kind of a general interest magazine writer and editor. I'd done a lot of business stuff. I hadn't really focused on entrepreneurship. And Bo and Norm kind of took me under their wings, and I learned most of what I knew from them, and later from Jay and a few other people, but they really got me started. I edited Norm's column, which he wrote with Bo. They did it together. It was always the best read thing in the magazine because,
it was real world experience.
Yeah. And he was telling it like it is, and people really responded to it. But it also changed my career in the sense that, we went off on this tangent at one point. I think Bo, Norm, and I all have different versions of this story. So I'll stand by mine, whether it's completely accurate or not. You'll have to ask Bo and Norm. But my recollection is we were having lunch one day, and Norm brought up that somebody was making him an offer to sell his business, which is a very valuable business with waterfront property in Brooklyn. And he said he had no interest in selling. And I said to him, "Well, why don't you talk to them? If nothing else, you'll get a column out of it. It could be interesting." Right. And he said, "Okay." So he did it. And one column led to another, It led to him actually selling his business. This thing, it took on a life of its own. We did, I've lost track. It turned into, I think, 10, 12, 13 columns, and to some extent, even a book that he and Bo did together. Yeah. It had some amazing moments in it. Like, this thing led to him getting an offer that he wound up accepting. And then at the last minute, they're there to sign the papers. They tried to change the numbers on him because they figured, nobody's going to walk away from this much money. But they didn't count on Norm being Norm. Norm's, right. You can't do that to me. He walked away. It was a great series of columns, which to me changed my life because I saw it as, if you could do this in a monthly magazine with a series of columns, could you imagine what you could do with a blog? And it was soon after that I switched from being a print editor to being an online web editor, which I really took to and really loved. So I have Bo and Norm to thank for many things, but especially that.
Well, and I'm sure they thank you as well. And I remember following the chronology of Norm, that whole process of him looking at selling his business, right? I mean, it became it really became like almost like a show, like you couldn't wait for the next episode, right? What was going to happen next, right? And then
it was amazing. And it was funny because he never would have done it if he had thought initially that he really was going to sell his business. I mean, who right. does that? Who goes into negotiations with other people? They would say to him across the table, they say, "You're not going to write about this, are you?" And he'd say, "Well, maybe."
Right.
And he did. He covered the whole thing.
Yeah, in a lot of detail. Yeah, and I remember when it fell apart at the end too. We're like, "Whoa!"
It was amazing, and there was a lot of really emotional stuff in there. Like, he wrote one column I'll always remember about, well, if I do sell my business, what will I be then? If somebody asks me what I do, what will I say? it was a really moving column that I think hit a nerve with a lot of people.
I remember that too, because that was his identity, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
storage business owner, entrepreneur was his identity. And I remember he writing, like, if he goes to the theater or a ball game or something, and who is he now, right? Like, how does he? Yeah. Well, he's done quite well, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
he's
he
done
ended
okay.
up selling the company, sold the land, and he still has some great ways to introduce himself, right? But I think that it's a good thing to think about, that a lot of entrepreneurs totally wrap their identity into the business, and then if the business is gone, who are they, right? And you do see a lot of business owners in their 60s that their whole life was maybe an insurance company or whatever business it was, and it became their identity. They sell it, they retire, and then they really don't know what to do, right? And sometimes it leads to some sadness, right? And so it was definitely a good thing to write about and get people to think about, hopefully in
Absolutely.
advance, so then they start having other identities just besides being the owner of a business, right? So uh, but Laura, I got you on this show because I want to talk about 21 Hats. So I listened to your podcast this morning, and I'm getting the emails, the email newsletter, 21 Hats. So tell us more about 21 Hats, and I know you got 5 business owners that you're working with, and what are your goals and hopes and dreams for 21 Hats? What are you trying to accomplish?
Well, thanks for asking. The idea really is to try to build a definitive community for business owners. I tried to do that at Inc., at the New York Times, and at Forbes, and had some success at each of them. You know, it was tricky though, because they were all established publications, and they all had their own ideas about the way things should work. At Inc., the focus was a little bit more on the Inc. 500 than I was completely comfortable with. When Bo wrote his book, I argued, you know what, this small giants thing, this is a whole different group of owners. It could be a twin pillar for Inc. magazine, along with the fast growth companies on the Inc. 500, the Inc. 5000. And I couldn't convince them to do it. I wound up going to the New York Times. It's a very different kind of animal. I started a small business blog there called You're the Boss. And really, Jay Goltz was one of my main writers there. It was a great experience. And one of the things I learned from it was that no matter how great I thought the content was that I was involved in producing, the real value on the blog was the response we got from our readers, because we got a loyal group of owners who read the blog regularly and would chime in. They would tell us when we made a mistake. They would tell us when we missed something. They would point out, other ways of looking at things. And that became the focal point of the blog. So I love that. But at the Times, covering entrepreneurship was a minor part of what they were doing. I couldn't convince them to build it bigger. I went to Forbes. At Forbes, I brought Bo over from Inc., and we created the annual list of Forbes Small Giants, which we felt was, it's still going, although I've been gone for close to 2 years now. But we picked 20 companies every year, arguably the best small businesses in America this year. And we found some great companies. So my goal with 21 Hats is kind of to try to bring all that together, but turn it into a real community just for business owners, a place where we create good content, but we encourage conversations among our readers and followers and listeners. So we're not as far along as I thought we'd be, in part because of this crisis you might have heard about. But we do have the podcast, which has turned into something I think kind of special. We started out thinking it would be kind of the view for business owners. I sit down for a weekly conversation with 3 of the 5 regulars every Friday, and we talk about what's going on in their business, what's working, what's not working. And, I'll pull in big issues that everybody might be facing. We talked about digital marketing. We talked about pricing. We talked about how to hire during, when nobody could find good help. If you remember back in the fall, then everybody was employed and it was hard to generate applications for jobs. Seems a long time ago now.
Right.
And then everything changed. We hit the crisis, and now it's become kind of coronavirus diaries. Every week we talk about where each of these owners stands in their attempt to survive. And it's become really moving. We have one owner from Houston, William Vanderbloemen. He has a really interesting search company that does searches, recruiting for churches and other faith-based organizations. We taped, I guess, a week and a half ago on a Friday, and he had to tell us the day before he had laid off 40% of his payroll, and he'd had to do it over Zoom. And, it was awful. It was really emotional. You could feel the pain. And, it's terrible to think about people going through that, whatever side of the layoff you're on. But that's kind of the purpose of the podcast. The hope is that other business owners will listen to this, and if nothing else, realize there are other people out there fighting the good fight and trying to get through this. Hopefully they'll pick up some tips from the podcast as well. But I think the most important thing we're trying to do is to just let people know, you're not alone in this. There are other people who are struggling. So that's the podcast. We do the morning email that you referred to. We try to pull together stories, links from all over the web every morning, must reads just for entrepreneurs, stuff that you can find in one place, which I think has become, much more valuable with the crisis. If you're trying to keep on top of what's happening with the rescue package and all of that, we've got that information for you first thing every morning.
Yeah, it's very cutting edge. I love it. If any of the 5 drop out, add me to the list. I'd be happy to help out. Or if they're on vacation.
I worried about that. They didn't sign up for this. They all have had a lot of success. I mean, none of them are household names, but they've been reasonably successful. And they thought they would have a chance to talk about, what's worked for them. But I let them know that we have to keep it real. So if you struggle with something, if, you try a marketing campaign and it doesn't work, we want to know what you tried and why it didn't work. Yeah. But nobody thought they were going to be talking about laying off 40% of their payroll or shutting down. Or we have a woman who has a chain of hair salons based in Detroit. And early on when the coronavirus hit, even before she had to close her stores, she just sat there during one podcast and said, I just keep thinking about what all these businesses are going through and whether they're going to survive or not. And I'm wondering if my business is going to survive. Mm-hmm. So it's not what we expected, but I'm hoping it serves a purpose.
Well, it's very timely. I like your kind of metaphor of, the view for entrepreneurs, right? Because, I know you got 5. I only know Jay Gault's, and I listened to it this morning. And I know Jay, for a fact, keeps it more than real. Jay is famous for telling you, more than you want to hear, which is helpful. And that's why I call him when I need advice.
That's the great thing about a podcast. You can edit. Don't tell Jay.
Yeah. No, he knows. I always call him when I need it real, and sometimes you want it tactful. Sometimes you want it candid. When I just want it, candid between the eyes, I call Jay.
In the episode that we just published, he has this great thing where he went through, I asked each of the owners, are you worried about whether your business is going to survive or not? And, Jay acknowledged that he'd thought about it, but then he came up with a kind of a stress test for a business in, a time of crisis. And he asked himself these 5 questions. That started with, is there still strong demand for what I do? And will that demand be there when this crisis is over? And his answer to that was yes. He went through all these things. And I think that the 2 key points that emerged from that is, one, he's really happy that he owns the buildings that his business operates in, because that removes one risk point. And I think that's something that a lot of owners can and should think about going forward. I mean, obviously, if you don't own your building today, this may not be the time for you to try to buy it if you don't have any revenue coming in. But if you get through this going forward, thinking about the next crisis that's going to come down the path, if you can put yourself in that position, that's a really great thing. The other thing Jay's really happy about is that he's never taken outside capital. So he truly is his own boss. He doesn't answer to anybody else. He doesn't have to worry about a partner who says, it's time to shut down, or you have to do this, or you have to do that, or I want to pull my money out.
Yeah. I can't picture Jay with partners or investors, I just can't picture it. Right. So, that's good advice. We were just talking about is to some extent, I know Jay owns 5 businesses, and a lot of them are retail, which he's had to shut down. But part of his businesses are, enable him to still make money, right, by owning the buildings and collecting rent. And to your point, if you can't do it now, you can't do it. But going forward, when this happens again or something like this, are there ways that you can pivot and adjust what you're doing to somehow, corona-proof or recession-proof your business, right? And
exactly.
And they used to say there's riches and niches. I have a friend who I called him the other day and said, how you doing? And he said, well, I went to the philosophy with my business that there's riches and niches. And he focused on, of all businesses, the travel industry, right? So he's a merchant account services company, and 90% of his clients are in the merchant services, right? Credit card processing. And now he's saying that niches are bitches because 90% of his business is on hold, right? So to Jay's point, all right, he's in the framing business and he's got a lot of different things going on with home decor, et cetera. But he also has a segment of where he's a landlord, right? And he's still making money that way. So it's with me, with Avanti, I'm looking at, how can I provide online curriculum to high schools and colleges? So not only when times are good and they could use it, but especially when times like this, when, teachers and professors need to come up with a lot of online curriculum for their students. Well, how can I be a part of that, right? With all the entrepreneurs that I know and interview, et cetera. In fact, I called Norm Brodsky about this idea last week, and he gave me some good advice about it. So I'm thinking like, all right, how can I still honor what I've built, but at the same time grow and pivot part of it to Corona / recession-proof my business, right?
Well, in these kinds of crises, there are always opportunities. There are always people who find a way to seize them. This has been tough for 21 Hats. We are a pre-revenue startup. I would have preferred that this not hit right now, but it did. And, if ever there's an opportunity for us to prove that we have value, this is it. If people don't need us now, then they're not going to need us, and we might as well move on and do something else.
Oh yeah. No, you're like the SOS. I love it. So, speaking of revenue, what is your revenue stream for 21 Hats, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, it doesn't exist at this point. We're hoping it will. I've partnered with another business. When I left Forbes, I hooked up with a company called Advantage Forbes Books. It's a book publishing company based in Charleston, South Carolina. Adam Whitty is the founder. It's been around for more than 10 years. Very substantial business. Adam bought 3 or 4 companies a couple of years ago. I was familiar with one of them. That was my introduction. But he kind of created this little ecosystem of entrepreneurs, and he was looking to build a platform to serve them. We got introduced, and I said to him, well, instead of just building a platform for your existing entrepreneurs and your existing ecosystem, let's be ambitious. Let's partner. Let's build a bigger platform, try to pull in lots of entrepreneurs and business owners. Some of them will end up buying books from you, and you'll profit that way. And we'll also, charge money, a subscription to be on the platform. So that was the idea. That's what we set out to do. We've designed this wonderful website that I'm really excited about. Unfortunately, it's completely on hold right now. It looks beautiful in my mind, but nobody else gets to see it, at least for a while. The hope is that we will create this platform. And again, it gets back to what I learned at You're the Boss, what I was telling you before. It has great content, but we want people to engage. We want to take advantage of the experience and expertise of our readers and have them participate in conversations. So it's really focused on that. And to answer your question, the goal is to have people pay to subscribe to that website. That all along we were thinking that the daily newsletter and the podcast would kind of be lead generators. That would help us pull people into the platform, which is what people would agree to pay for, and how we would generate revenue, along with some sponsorship dollars. Hopefully some businesses trying to reach business owners would agree to pay us to sponsor. Without the platform, we're kind of stuck at the moment. So we're trying to scramble and pivot and figure things out, just as you were saying. And I think we haven't fully decided this. We may try to get people to pay for some combination of the morning report, that daily newsletter that we're producing, and a weekly webinar that we're also doing called the 21 Hats War Room. Like I said, if they don't need us now, they're never going to need us. So maybe we might as well find out now if people see value in what we're doing, and if they're willing to give us a small fee every month or once a year for what we're doing. And the hope is that'll get us on track, and eventually we will build that website that I was telling you about.
Excellent. Well, let me know when. I will be. Can I be your first official subscriber?
You're there.
All right.
You can start paying right now, Dave. You don't have to wait till it exists, do you?
I'm in. Send me the link. I'm in. Loren Feldman, thank you so much. The guy that has been editing and writing and really being the conductor of incredible entrepreneurial content for many, many years. We talked about Inc. Magazine, New York Times, Forbes, Small Giants, partnering with Small Giants, and now you are an entrepreneur, right? So look at that, right? You wanted to drink the Kool-Aid a little bit.
I think you have to have some success before you're really an entrepreneur. I mean, if nothing else, you need to have $1 in revenue before you're really an entrepreneur. I'm not there quite yet.
Send me the link. I'm going to be your first subscriber, then you're official, right?
I really appreciate that.
Yeah, and you have the entrepreneurial spirit at the very least. But I consider you an entrepreneur. You've done so many things, so many great things for the entrepreneurial community. So thank you, Loren. Hey, if people, give you a plug here, people want to learn more about you and in 21 Hats, where do they go?
Well, they can go to 21hats.com and sign up there for the daily newsletter. And they can also find the podcast there. And they can find the podcast wherever they get podcasts. And if they like it, it would really be wonderful if they subscribe to it and rate it and review it, because that's how we get more listeners on, Apple iTunes or Google Play or Stitcher or Spotify, wherever people get podcasts. It really helps to have somebody subscribe and rate and review. But I know you know all that, Dave.
I do. I will do it for your podcast if you do it for mine.
Done.
All right. All right, Loren. So 21hats.com. And I imagine if they want to reach you there, they can reach you there as well.
Or I'll give you my email, which is lfeldman, Feldman, at 21hats.com. I'm always eager to hear from entrepreneurs.
Excellent, Loren. Thank you so much. Appreciate it, and wishing you incredible success as we climb out of this twilight zone time period and you build your content, build your value. Guarantee success will find you.
My pleasure, Dave. Thanks so much for doing this. You've had a lot of way more famous and interesting people on than I am. I appreciate being in their company. Thank you for thinking of me.
Well, you're very humble. In my mind, you're kind of a big deal. So thank you, Loren.
Nice of you to say.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to thank all the Avanti family as well for listening and or watching. I'm always honored that you're giving me some of your heartbeats and some of your day. I appreciate it. For more podcast interviews and a lot more resources, go to AvantiEntrepreneur.com. Make it a great day and stay awesome.